When I was 17, I learned an odd fact about my mother's pregnancy with me. Now, the year before, two of my uncles died. My mother's two brothers. One was in his 50s and one was in his 40s, and so I started thinking about becoming a vegetarian. On my father's side of the family, all the men died in their 50s, and I never knew my grandparents. They were dead before I was born. So the first day of summer vacation after my junior year in high school, I got up in the morning and I had an English muffin with jam for breakfast. And the phone rang. It was my old buddy Dave, who was here today, and he called me. I said, "Hey Dave, congratulate me. I became a vegetarian." And Dave said, "That's great. Since when?" I said, "Well, you know, since breakfast." And he laughed at me. And it's a good thing that he laughed at me, because it's now been 41 years of meals without dead animals since that English muffin. Now, Dave himself would go on to become a vegetarian a mere 25 years later after seeing the movie Chicken Run. Dave was just morally outraged by the treatment of those claymation figures. I say he became a vegetarian. He actually became a pescatarian. He was still eating fish for a few more years until he saw Finding Nemo. I know we have a few animal rights activists in the crowd. Dave is actually like a cartoon character activist. The next person I told was my mother. I said, "Mom, I'm a vegetarian." And she said, "Well, what took you so long to figure that out?" I said, "Well, what does that mean?" She said, "Well, when I was pregnant with you, I was determined to raise you as a vegetarian from birth. But the doctor told me that you wouldn't grow up strong and your bones wouldn't develop and your brain wouldn't develop, so he scared me." So I said, "Oh, wait a minute, Mom. You're not a vegetarian. Dad's not a vegetarian. Sheila, my sister's not a vegetarian. Why were you going to raise me as a vegetarian?" And she said, "Because, Glenn, when I was pregnant with you, you felt like a vegetarian." Now, to you or me, that is patent insanity. But by my mother's standards, that was a reasonably sensible statement. So I said, "Mom, were you ever planning on telling me that I was destined to be a vegetarian?" She said, "I was waiting for you to figure it out. What took you so long?" I told my father I was a vegetarian. He was okay with it. My father was a moderate in all things. He believed in moderation. Thought it was okay that I'd be a vegetarian as long as I ate meat once in a while. 20 years later, I turned vegan, and in Los Angeles, I met Mar Nealon, who is here today, one of the actresses. Mar, I call her the queen of vegan. And Mar introduced me to Howard Lyman. We had lunch at Real Food Daily in Santa Monica, and they pitched to me the idea of writing a screenplay based on Howard's life. Now, the arc of Howard's life is terrific. He went from being a cattle rancher to being a vegan. And it was terrific, and I listened to the story, and then I just declined. I said I couldn't write the screenplay. I said, "Howard, in the third act climax, when you order the stir-fried vegetables, I don't know how to write that." So there was a silence at the table, and then Mar said, "Well, then how about a book?" And I said, "Well, I suppose I could try to write a book." And Howard and I wrote the book Mad Cowboy, which has done pretty well over the years. Came out in '98. And 15 years later, a producer who optioned the book for a movie, go figure. A producer called me up and asked me if I would write the screenplay. And this time I said yes. And then I called Howard. And I said, Howard, I've just agreed to write a screenplay based on your life. Do you happen to have any stories? And he told me a good one. So that's how this came about. Through my friendship with Howard Lyman, I would get to meet many of the leaders in the vegan movement in America. And I got to learn more about this path that I had chosen more or less on instinct. And one thing I learned is that the correct human diet is actually determinable by science, the science of comparative anatomy. Scientists look at the anatomy of all mammalian carnivores, like the cat, and all mammalian omnivores, like the bear, and all mammalian herbivores, like our cousins, the great apes, and they see what they have in common. They look at things like the gape of the mouth and the type of the dentition and the presence of enzymes in the saliva and the shape of the jaw and the movement of the jaw and the hydrochloric acid in the stomach and the length of the intestine and the presence and the absence of claws. And what they find is that for every single characteristic, every single one, human beings are herbivores. It's just scientific fact. We were designed to be herbivores. Now, our closest cousins, the chimps, sometimes the male chimps get in the trees and they surround a monkey. And they trap the monkey and they grab it and they slam it down on the branches. They break its neck. They rip apart its living flesh. And they give pieces of the living flesh to female chimps in exchange for sex.
Oh.
Now that is appalling behavior. I am not going to condone that for a minute. But they're not doing it for nutritional reasons. They're doing it to get laid. When I was single, I did much worse. Now, I couldn't have known it at 17, but the human taste for flesh was the #1 reason we were chopping back the Amazon. And I couldn't have known it at 17, but the planet had already started to melt, and the melting has accelerated since then. And according to a UN report, the #1 reason for global warming, by far, is animal agriculture. So I have no religion. I'm not going to invoke God. My only religion maybe is veganism. But I can say this. It's as if there were a God. It's as if there were a God, and she's looking down at us, and she's saying, this beautiful planet is yours to keep. All the plant life, all the animal life, all the water, all the streams, it's yours to keep as long as you figure it out. But if you don't figure it out, if you keep indulging your taste for flesh, you'll perish and the planet will melt. So figure it out. What's taking you so long? Thank you. That's my story.